Welcome to Master and Student Psychotherapist. What I want to do today is I want to look at actually what happens in learning, right, with counselling stroke therapist in mind. It is very specific what we're doing here in this podcast, but that's because we're both involved in it. But take the bigger picture on what we're trying to do as well. You know, this shows you how we're learning and how we're going forward. When you are a counsellor, you have a set of guidelines that you have to swallow whole, right? Now, I have just learnt about this, and I think let me look at my notes. Okay, so, you know, there's 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9 core conditions to counselling. Were you taught the same thing?
Kind of.
Okay, so, I mean, when you're looking at counselling itself, the end result is not for the counsellor to provide you with the outcomes or the outlooks or even the solutions to your problems, but it is to work forward using a client relationship, build some kind of relationship with them and give them things to achieve, and they find their own solutions, because that's the key, isn't it? Everyone has their own solution inside them.
Or there is no solution, and then you work on acceptance.
Acceptance and then coping, or just accepting the situation?
Just acceptance.
That's interesting. Okay, so can we do a rough for instance? So what with the acceptance thing, what would come to you with that? So a person comes to you with something
that can't be changed. So for example, maybe infertility.
Okay.
So somebody, you know, they find out that they can't have kids, they're devastated, they want to work through the emotions, they want to do the whole, you know, why me, you know, why can't I have a baby, etc. And there is no solution to that. I mean, you can look into things like, you know, have you thought about adoption? That's not really my job, because they will have thought about all of that stuff anyway. You know, that's...
But, right, so stop there. So you are not there to provide the have you thought of, right? So your key role is to look at their reaction to the end result, which is them not having kids.
Absolutely, because for me to say something like, have you thought about adoption, is so insulting to the client, because of course they've thought about every single possible avenue, and they've probably researched it and gone over and over and over it. And for me to sit there and say something like that, I think, you know, I just think it's very insulting. So what I would work on is, you know, how does that feel? What is that like for you? What's your emotional response? You know, not in so many words. You know, we'd go through the whole journey that person is experiencing as a result of hearing that news. And then what I believe happens is a grieving process, which is what most therapy is you are grieving a scenario. So that person might be grieving the fact that they're never going to be a biological parent. So you go through the stages of grieving, and I can't remember exactly what they are, but it's like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then right at the end becomes acceptance. And the acceptance, in my opinion, really is the prize at the end of the work, is that you just are able to say, it's really sad, I'm gutted, but it is what it is.
But it is what it is. And also, I think the grieving process is, like you said, it's all things. You know, when we were addicts, it functioned like, you know, addicts in using addicts. See, I don't know the terminology. When we were using addicts, you know, at no point inside of that, at the start of it all, did we look at addiction or anything. We just took these drugs because it made us feel good. We drank because it made us feel good. You know, there was no cause and effect. So even when you stop being an addict, you have to look at leaving that behind. Is there a grief process for that? Yeah?
Definitely.
Right. I mean, how, you know, because that manifested with me that there was a lot of loneliness. Because also I took a lot of drugs because I like being around people. And I think I know why that was, because I didn't want to listen to the sound of my own noise. because as a human being, you generate your own thought tracks and, you know, rumination and all of those, you know, internal thought processes which can destroy you. So the grief process, whatever you're going through, so infertility, you know, actual grief at somebody dying and not being able to deal with that. You know, there are plenty of grief counsellors who will take you through the steps. And it is odd that there seems to be a defined set of levels. So the bargaining one always does that. You know, oh, I'd do anything if they could just, and it's like, well, you, like, what? You can't do that. And it seems odd on the outside, but if you've gone through that, you know, my mother died, you know, that's all that, and I went through actual grief, but it took me 5 years to do it because I never acknowledged it, didn't look at it, didn't want to know. And then made the terrible mistake of watching Marley and Me. Yeah.
Is that a sad film?
Yeah, it's got dogs.
God.
And the dog.
Does the dog die?
Yeah.
Why would you watch that?
Well, I don't know. And then, yeah, but it's what I'm trying to say by all of this rubbish is that, about the dog thing, not the rest of it, is that when you acknowledge loss, and one of the biggest losses in my life was my dog Skylar. Because when I was sick and had all that, she was the one that stood next to me at all times. Everyone else, apart from a couple like Rob Clydesdale and people that were helping me, but everyone else disappeared because I wasn't in their conscious thought. And it's not, nobody stopped to think, oh, Jim's ill, we'll just leave him. They just thought, oh, I haven't seen Jim for a while, never mind. You know what I mean? So the grieving process, I think, is really important. But when you get a new client, right, you have to look at things to make them talk and build that relationship, right?
Yeah, it's about the relationship. In my opinion, it's all about building the relationship at first.
Is there a negative to that? Is there ever a time where you, as a psychotherapist, got it right,
well done,
had to look though, a psychotherapist then just goes, you know, I can't help this person?
I mean, it has happened, yeah. Right. Sometimes there's something that gets in the way, and often the client just doesn't come back, so they won't book a second session, or they just won't turn up, or you know, very, very occasionally I will think, I don't know how to work with this person, and I might refer them on to somebody else. Right,
so referring's the key. So even as a trained psychotherapist, there are limits.
Oh yeah, and it's good to know that one has limits as well, because not everybody's my cup of tea, and I'm not everybody's cup of tea. You know, so sometimes the relationship just doesn't work. It doesn't form. Yeah,
I mean, it's not a friendship, right? Right, because there are boundaries set, and we'll probably go on to that later. But you know, the relationship is built in that you have come for help and acceptance of your help, and finding a way to accept your situation. So we've looked at that acceptance. That's the end goal for some people.
Or change.
Or change. Okay. So when you have a specific problem, that specific problem, being whatever it is can be looked at in a formulaic way, because a lot of therapy is, no matter what the subject, is about listening, using open questioning, using closed questioning just to clarify. Right, open questioning, for instance, is I ask you a question and you say yes or no. That's a closed question, right? An open question is I ask you, how did it feel when you got into that situation? And that makes you, god damn it, use sentences. Okay, so that's the first thing, you know. Well, the first thing really is finding a place to talk. But do you have a office?
I've got a therapy room in my home, so my spare room is my therapy room.
Okay. How does that, I just had a tangent thought. How does that make you feel to have your clients come to your house?
I actually don't mind. Like, a lot of people I speak to say, oh, I wouldn't want that. It doesn't bother me. I'm quite happy to, I can
Can you now?
I can compartmentalise, okay, you know, once my work is done for the day, it's done, and I don't feel that there's a lingering kind of energy in that room or anywhere else in my home. Okay. Work is finished and it's done.
Okay, right, because there is a certain paranoia that comes from being a criminal. My reaction to that is, what happens if they turn up when they're not supposed to, because they know where you live? Is that a thing?
I mean, clients have turned up when I haven't been expecting them, but that's usually because I have forgotten to write them in my diary. So I have had that happen on a couple of occasions, but I've never had anything malicious. Like, no one's ever rocked up at my door at 2 a.m, you know, desperately begging for help or anything like that.
Okay.
You know, if that did happen, I'd cross that bridge when I came to it. But
but it hasn't.
No, it hasn't.
You see, that's my paranoia showing, I suppose.
But well, everybody has a different viewpoint about working from home, and I just happen to be one of those people where I just don't give it an awful lot of thought.
Also, you know, without going into any details, your partner understands the life.
Absolutely.
So he knows the deal,
and he's great because we have this kind of unwritten rule whereby, when he comes home, he knows by the way the doors are open or closed whether I've got a client. I mean, often he'll check with me before he comes home, but he knows if my door is shut, the bedroom door is shut, the living room door is shut, and the kitchen door is shut, he knows there's a client in the flat.
So they can't see any part.
Yeah, so he will be really quiet and he'll go into a room. Often he'll put earplugs in, you know, and he's just brilliant. He just knows. So we've got it down to a T.
That's cool. That's real teamwork as well. That's great. He sounds great, doesn't he?
He is.
No. Right, so you have a safe space for them to talk and for you to listen.
Yeah.
And then you need to start your questioning.
Yeah.
But have you got a set of questions?
No, and everybody's different and everybody responds differently to different ways of working, and I think this is one of the key attributes of being a therapist, is to know intuitively what that client needs.
Right.
Because I mean, I will ask clients, do you want me to ask you questions, do you want to just start talking? You know, on the first session I will always have that conversation to get a feel for what sort of person they are. Most people just want to start talking. But I am the kind of therapist that will challenge people. So I do ask questions and I do make interpretations. So I will say what I think about what they've said. Some therapists don't do that. They don't give interpretation. So again, that's down to the modality that you study.
There always has to be clarification of what people are actually saying.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there's clarification, there's just checking out. So what I think you're saying is blah, 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 blah. But what I also do in addition to that is, so I wonder if that means that. So
you're looking at cause and effect.
Yeah.
So if you're this, don't you mean you're this?
Well, I'm curious. So I never sort of say, well, that means that. I will say things like, that's interesting. So, you know, you telling me about that dream, Jim, I wonder if that's linked to that thing that happened with your mum.
Right.
You know, I'll make those connections.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, all of these things, you know, I mean, there are 9 of these, right? So, you know, we've talked about environment, unconditional. Oh, actually, let's talk about that. Unconditional positive regard.
I think that's a crock of shit, if I'm honest.
Yeah, well,
it's really hard to have unconditional, completely unconditional positive regard. That is, if you're a human being and you have feelings and a heart that beats, it's really hard to have that.
Can you not turn that off, though, all that humanist thing?
Funnily enough, no.
Right, that there is a golden, shining example of where learning from a book ends and your actual personal experience with clients takes over. Now, I am not in a position to criticise the learning that I've done because I've done this much. But you've been doing, how long have you been qualified?
I think it's 10 years this year, I think.
Wow.
But I've been working with clients since 2012. So, you know, I started working as a trainee. I started working with clients.
12 years, right. So in that 12 years, you are going to know more by experience, right, than the base level facts of what they teach you. But that's not to dismiss those facts. What you have to do, though, is take those 9 core conditions and you can mould them to what you need for each client. And I think that's really important. There is no black and white in therapy. There is no this is that, because Joe Bloggs and Sandra Bloggs are 2 very different people. They might have the same condition. I just did air quotes, I hate that. Right? They might have the same condition, but they are very different human beings and they've got to that situation in different ways. So that's very eye-opening for me as the student. You see, it's really difficult for me to be a student as well, because I'm always in bloody charge. I'm always the man. No, I don't mean the man as in male, female. I just mean the man as in I'm the one leading.
Go-to man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of humbling in a way, you know, that I have to, one, bow to your greater knowledge, because that's just annoying, right? But secondly, that I'm lapping it up and I'm intrigued by what you know. I want to call inside your head. Well, I don't.
But you see, this is the wonderful thing about learning as an adult, when it's your choice. You have chosen something that you're really interested in, and that is going to make the whole process so much easier than slogging your way through something that you couldn't give a crap about.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I mentioned geography last time, and I couldn't give a flying fuck about any of that. I just couldn't.
No.
Right, but this lights a fire under my ass. Now, that can be transposed to anything, and I want to keep saying this, right? Whatever you want to learn, whether you want to change direction in life, which is already half gone, or you are brand new out of school and you're looking for a passion, there will be something. Car mechanics, bloody welding, tattooing, teaching, all of that, right? If you have a passion for anything, right, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. That's not easy for me to say before you say it's easy for you to say. Because I have agonised over doing this. But there was no need to agonise at all. I just needed to get on with it. And I think, like I've said before, I needed permission to do it. And that's great. So, I mean, do you think clients need permission to talk to us as counsellors?
I think sometimes clients need permission to talk about specific things. So something that often comes up is that this feeling of being disloyal when a client is talking about somebody else. So, you know, the classic stuff is talking about mum or talking about dad. And often clients they struggle with that feeling of, I don't want to say this out loud. I don't want you to think bad of my mum, you know. So often clients need permission to say whatever it is that they need to say, you know, without there being any judgment coming from me. And I can say that. I can say I'm not judging you, but we all know what that's like. If you're going to share your deepest, darkest, you're pretty sure the other person's going to be thinking, what? Oh my God, you know? So I have to try and get across to the client somehow that I'm not coming from a judgmental place. And often when I see addiction clients, I can do that by telling them that I'm in recovery, which I don't always do. I don't always self-disclose, but if I think it's going to help that person open up, if they know I've been where you've been, I've done what you've done, please don't feel like I'm going to judge you, because I drank, vodka at 10 o'clock in the morning as well. So if you did too, that's fine. You know, often that is a good way of giving people permission to say whatever they need to say.
There is a big thing about this as well. I mean, part of my end result decision to do this was because I have gone through addiction and I am, you know, as stable as I can be as a human being, and I have found a way. And also the interesting thing about our relationship is that it's the juxtaposition. I didn't do the 12 steps. I did not have the backup. And I think now, in retrospect, if I'd not been a twat about the whole higher power thing, I would have accepted that. And I would have benefited from that.
So why don't you do it now then?
Well, because I don't want to. Because also, you know, I haven't got time. Oh, is that? Oh, yeah. There are lots of excuses. We may have to look at that one day.
I think we should do a whole show about why Jim won't do the 12 steps.
We probably will. I mean, the short answer to that, though, is that even though I have accepted that a higher power is not God, and therefore construction, religion, what's the word I'm looking for? Religion that is, you know, in churches. What the hell is the word I'm looking for?
Organised religion?
Yes. God damn, you can see how good she is at looking inside your brain. So, yeah, I don't need an organised religion, right? But I'm a great believer in the vocalisation of your problems, i.e. just being in a room talking to the ether, right? So therefore I must have some kind of belief system, and stop being smug about it. Right, so look, I want to just finally talk about listening. Listening is not a process that is as easy as you might think. So we've looked at judgment, Yeah, we've looked at, you know, the way that you have to group yourself, you know, pull yourself in, look at how you treat people, look at where you're going. But listening is the biggest part. The talking from you isn't, is it?
No, I think I've read or heard somewhere it should be about 80-20.
Yep.
So the therapist speaks 20% of the time and the client 80%.
Yeah. I think if you are in a position where you have to listen, you also have to understand what listening is. So someone comes to you with their problems, right? Now you've said that sometimes you do disclose that you're an addict. Right, but what you're not going is, oh yeah, no, I can relate, I'm an addict, I this and that, blah blah. You just say the words, I understand, I'm in recovery, right? So instead of planting your bad situation with them to help them, what you're actually doing is saying, actually, I'm more important than you for a minute, can we just focus on me? What you're not doing is going, do you know what, just tell me all. And listening is being able to take in what they're saying. You make your notes so you can refer back, which have to be kept securely, ladies and gentlemen, right? And also just hearing what's being said, because they will not give you all the details. So you have to listen, and you, to a certain degree, fill in the blanks, right? Because you know that some people will talk in roundabouts and non-specifics, but from that you can glean more or less where they're coming from. So listening isn't the conversation you have with your mum over tea about who did what and when. Listening is being able to take the information you are being given, swallow it whole, and understand what's happening. And empathy is a big part of that as well, rather than, you know, just taking it on, because you cannot judge. Yeah, you can't really argue with what's going on, apart from you can challenge. What's the, I mean, you know, looking at listening, what do you think is the most important point of that listening time for you? What, you know, is it the imparting of knowledge? Is it watching their body language, seeing what they do? What is it?
I mean, it's the whole package, really. So it is about listening to what's actually being said. It's listening to what's not being said.
Yeah.
It is body language, and it's like the energy that's in the room. And often I judge that by my own response to the client. So if I feel very tired, I think, what's that about? If I feel like there's loads of stuff I want to say, what's that about? If I'm feeling like I've got a headache, what's that about? So my response to what the client is saying is also part of me understanding what it is they're saying.
Okay.
So it's the whole thing.
So that takes it a step further. You're not just a mirror, like, to show back what they're doing. You're actually, your perception of their problems creates a dialogue.
Yeah.
But how do you guard against, like, I mean, I'm focusing on judgment because I think I'm quite judgmental as a human being.
Yeah.
So I've got to learn not to be. How do you? Go on.
No, it's not about learning not to be judgmental. It's about learning to notice your judgmentalism.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it's about thinking, oh, I feel a response to that. So Jim said something about blah blah, and I've got an emotional response because I've got an opinion about that. And it's just about noticing that. Okay, yeah, I've got that going on, and just kind of putting it to one side.
Yeah.
Because everybody judges everybody all the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm judging you now.
I'm judging you now.
Yeah, well, I know that.
I am.
George is judging us both.
Oh God.
I just, that's really interesting. So it's not about, like, stepping on your own emotions as a therapist. It's about understanding your reaction to them. And then you can just say, okay, I need to move that, but I've done that, so this is how they think they're perceived.
Yeah.
That's insightful, because then you can see what society's doing. Is a lot of the therapy process that people are worried about the overall perception of who they are and what they've done? Yeah,
I think there's loads of that. I think people are worried about how they come across, how people view them, what people think about them. I think a lot of people come to therapy with those kinds of narratives going on in their head. Yeah, but what will people think?
Yeah.
You know.
And eventually, pardon me, you have to just fuck off what everyone thinks. And
yeah, that's easier said than done, though, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
you know, I agree. It's like, what does it matter? But if you are that kind of person that worries, you know, if you're a worrying kind of person, or then it is easier. It's no use me saying to you, oh, don't worry about it. What does it matter what they think? Yeah. That's not helpful.
That's not helpful. No. You see, yeah, because I am right at the beginning of this journey as well. You know, I'm looking at my own mistakes and looking at my reactions to things. And what you're saying is helpful to me, because obviously now I've got an insight into where I have to be. The other thing that, you know, that interests me is the questioning. You have to know what to ask and what not to ask. Obviously, there are some people who, if you do the silence thing, so the silence thing for a therapist is when they are sat in the chair and they don't say a goddamn thing. Right? So you've got to a situation where you're talking, right? But now in the textbook, it says that silence helps your clients reflect. No. I'm going to argue with that now. Okay. Right? I think that silence, when you've just talked about you know, a hugely personal thing, and they're worried about it, and you do all that, and you want them to reflect on what they've said, if you sit there and like not stare at them, but you're in silence. Silence creates, for me, judgment. So is that just my baggage, or is that, you know, is that a thing? You have to, obviously you've got to know when to do all these things. You've got to know when to summarise. You've got to know when to paraphrase what they've said and throw it back at them. You've got to know when to be silent.
And that's the key, it's knowing when to be silent. And I will take my cue from my client. So if my client is talking about something, they get really distressed or upset, I can tell now when to leave them to have their feelings, and when to just check in and make sure everything's okay. And I'm a pretty good judge of that now, I think, and that is a skill that you do have to learn.
That comes with time.
Because you can't just leave your client hanging like that. You're both looking at each other in silence. But if my client has got their head down, maybe they're crying, you know, I'm going to leave them, because I'm not going to start, are you okay? Is everything all right? You know, I'm just letting them have their moment, work through whatever's going on for them. So it is about learning how to use silence.
That's the other thing as well, working through what they've just said and what causes them pain. Now obviously you can see the trigger, but also leaving them to digest what that, because they might have just had a realization, they might have just understood why they're so upset by this and never seen it before, because they've never had the opportunity to put it in front of themselves. And that moment's a private moment. Yeah. Even though you're with the therapist then knows to say, okay, give them a minute.
Yeah, just sit with them. Just come alongside them in their moment, you know, and witness it. And sometimes that's all they need. It's all we need as a human being, is we just need someone to witness what this is and how I feel about this. I don't need you to comment. I don't need you to make any kind of clever comments or anything about it. I just need you to witness this.
That's awesome. I mean, you know, these whole 9 guidelines that I'm looking at and everything, and I've just written a you know, whatever it's called, an assessment about the whole thing. You know, there are some things that I argue with, but not in a combative, I know best way, just in a, I can't see how that works. But that is learning. That's how this works. I then question what I'm spoon-fed by a textbook. And that questioning leads me to understanding. And if you can understand just one of those 9 principles in full, that's an amazing thing. So then go on to the next one, find a way to get that. We have run out of time. So look, we are going to go into some detail about, you know, psychotherapy and the way to look at counselling. And if you're interested in counselling, then this show is for you. But also, if you're interested in new starts, then, you know, this is what this is about too. And let me tell you this, if you need permission to change your life, I'm telling you now, I'm giving you permission to go and look at a new way forward. And I think, Laura, right, we can, if you need us, if you want to send in some messages or write in the comments, we'll look at that and we'll do our best. You know, obviously Laura's very busy and we do shows, but we won't just leave you hanging. If you have any questions, make sure that you get in touch. Take care now.